It is such a thrilling experience to stand here today as a speaker, especially after the last TEDx event where we had to run around all day long, not even having the opportunity to enjoy our own event. I still remember how nervous I was on that day, but strangely, standing on stage now feels much more peaceful. When I first got the invitation to speak, if I were to be honest, I remember I was not sure if I could offer worthwhile ideas to all the precious people gathered here today. But as I was preparing for my speech, I remembered one important fact. Standing here is not the privilege itself. Rather, this chance of speaking to all of you and telling about myself and reaching you through my ideas was what made this event so meaningful. Being vulnerable in front of you all and admitting that I was afraid at first to stand atop the red carpet made me feel like the commander of my own life, not afraid to show myself transparently. So, speaking of transparency, how many of you think that vulnerability is a weakness? Can you raise your hands if you do, please? Okay, many people I see. And how many of you would agree if I said, vulnerability is actually the quality of a good leader? Raise your hands if you do, please. Okay, many people again, that's good. So, when I was 14 years old, I walked through the halls of this school as a student, just like all the young faces gathered here today. I remember feeling overwhelmed and intimidated by the challenges ahead of me, and most of all, I remember feeling the need to suppress my emotions and hide my vulnerabilities. But as I stand here today, 4 years later, I am filled with a much stronger sense of conviction and purpose, still on the path of discovering myself and getting rid of the senseless effort at trying to hide my emotions. The experiences that I've had and the lessons that I've learned have all shaped me into the person that I am today, and I'm grateful for every single one of them. But what excites me the most now is this chance to speak to all these young faces walking down the same path I once walked on, and to be in the presence of those who have already walked ahead of us, to offer insights and my own perspective that may help you on your journey, and to remind all that the journey never really ends. While we're telling our stories, stories may have been used to defame and isolate, but they can also liberate and humanize. While we are telling our stories and walking down the path of an unclear future, how can we isolate our own emotions and thoughts? Is a strict perception of vulnerability actually for our own good? Or are we just suppressing our own tears and hiding our vulnerabilities only to end up overwhelmed? For far too long, the perception of crying and vulnerable side have been seen as signs of weakness. We are taught from a young age that we shan't cry, and that crying is not something strong people do. But I believe that the opposite should be true. Crying is not a weakness. In fact, it takes a great deal of strength to open our emotions, open up about our emotions, and to be willing to show ourselves for who we truly are. When we cry, we're not showing weakness, rather courage. We are showing that we're willing to be understood and that we're willing to share our emotions with others. Crying is a natural and healthy way to express our emotions. It helps us release our feelings, let go of the pain and hurt that we're carrying inside. It's a powerful tool that can help us heal and move forward in our lives. As Abraham Lincoln quoted from Lord Byron's poem he knew very well, "I laugh because I must not weep, that is all." Laughing to mask the need of weeping, this was merely it. As much as Lincoln's act of laughing was merely a life preserver not to bury himself into depression from his responsibilities, the puzzling prejudice against crying and showing vulnerability have not been quite rightfully adapted from his story. And I fell into this conundrum when I was younger as well. If I laugh at any mortal thing, it is that I may not weep. This merely shows the need to embrace the disasters of life with laughter, but not quite to hide our weeping faces from others to appear strong. My younger self thought that showing any vulnerability would make me seem weak, incompetent, and incapable of handling my own emotions. It wasn't until I grew older and gained more life experience that I realized the power of vulnerability. Being honest and open about our emotions will actually make us stronger and more relatable as leaders. In my first year in high school, I was very overwhelmed by the change of culture and being apart from my family as I suddenly started living very far away from home. Having to manage my life in a very different way compared to the past and needing to adapt quickly, I wasn't sure if I was faring well or if I was just forcing myself to believe that everything was great. Having misinterpreted the notion of weakness, I was feeling quite stifled as I waited for days to pass without thinking and feeling much. Or at least that was what I thought I was doing. One day, my mom and aunt came to visit me in my dorms, and we went out for supper. Smiling and laughing all day long, I thought it was quite a happy day. But while we were watching a street performance on the streets, I suddenly started bawling my eyes out of nowhere. It was so out of place that the police standing in the corner had to come and check if something was wrong. And I believe I gave quite the scare to the young performers as well. Nevertheless, I could not stop myself from crying out loud, and I wasn't even sure why I was so sad. To their questions, I merely replied with a simple, "I'm okay." In fact, I was not okay at all. I was feeling overwhelmed, but I could only realize this fact after calming down and thinking slowly. So, where did it all go wrong? In fact, there is nothing wrong. Just the act of suppressing yourself and donning a smiling expression all day long, any normal person would break down. To be the leader of our own lives and to stand strong, ladies and gentlemen, do not equate letting go of our real selves and masking our emotions at all. Whether it be in a business environment or in daily life, we don't need to mask our emotions to be in control of our lives. As the Chinese said, it is as impossible to find a perfect man as it is to find 100% pure gold. Just as gold can never be completely pure, there will always be flaws in our character and in our actions. This idea is particularly relevant when it comes to leadership. As leaders, we often feel the pressure to be perfect, to always have the right answers, and to always make the right decisions. But the truth is, no leader can be perfect. We all make mistakes, we all have flaws, and we all have moments of weakness. By embracing the fact that we're imperfect, we open ourselves up to the possibility of growth and improvement. We recognize that we can grow further and we can prioritize self-reflection and self-improvement. Furthermore, embracing our imperfections allows us to show that we are not afraid to be seen as imperfect. And it allows us to show that we're willing to share our emotions with others. When we acknowledge our own flaws, we are better able to understand and connect with the flaws of others. Speaking of Chinese proverbs, I believe that the story of Liu Bang and Xiangyu is a perfect historical representation of our case. The former is a benevolent peasant ruler, and the latter is a ruthless military general. Liu Bang and Xiangyu were both prominent figures during the Chu-Han contention period in ancient China. Liu Bang was the founder of the Han Dynasty and is often regarded as one of the most successful rulers in Chinese history. On the other hand, Xiangyu was a prominent military leader known for his bravery and military prowess. Liu Bang's success as a leader can be attributed to his straightforward public attitude as a vulnerable leader. He understood that a leader's power and influence should be based on his subjects. His compassion towards the common people and his fair treatment of his soldiers earned him their loyalty and support. In contrast, Xiangyu's cruelty and arrogance caused him to lose the support of his subjects and ultimately led to his downfall. Liu Bang's leadership style serves as a perfect example of how leaders treat other people with respect, compassion, and empathy, while further highlighting the fact that being vulnerable should never be equated to failure or weakness. To all the leaders assembled here today, there is a most meaningful poem that I want to share. For those of us who are afraid to take a step forward, for those of us who are afraid to accept our brilliance and afraid to embrace our innermost fears. Life is but a play composed of at most 7 stages. As Shakespeare defines it, there is no human whose life fares on a much different path, and we're all subjected to the realities of a mundane life. All the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players. They have their exits and their entrances, and one man in his time plays many parts, his acts being 7 ages. How vulnerable we are towards the passage of time, yet we grit our teeth and work for our dreams. We are all aware of the evolving seasons and crashing waves, but we ignore our greatness and hide behind our carefully crafted masks, not daring to step up. Life is at most a 7-stage play, as Shakespeare defined. So what are we so afraid of that we cannot claim ourselves as leaders? Are we so overwhelmed by the word that we've made it only particular to the world's greatest heroes? Why are we terming it as something beyond ourselves, something more than us? In the end, isn't it so that the only thing one can possess is merely oneself? When I first started thinking and contemplating of how to convey these thoughts and emotions to this wholesome audience, the following lovely encouragement was given to me by my equally lovable roommate, Irem. Whatever you do, in the end, which you entirely own will be only yourself. Whatever you learn, the only thing that you will know with certainty is your own will and thoughts. So speak of what you deem the truth. Indeed, rather than trying to leave the world as a perfect Xiangyu, it is better to embrace eternity as a vulnerable and imperfect Liu Bang, aware that the things that we share commonly with others is what makes us special, not needing to separate ourselves into many sections to find a place we try to uniquely fit in. While we are nearing the end of this talk, I want to leave you with a final thought. Being a vulnerable and empathetic leader is not just important for strictly business-related situations, but is just as important for success in real life. When we treat others with compassion and respect, we create a culture of understanding and trust that can help us build stronger relationships with those around us. But it is not just those leaders, not just those world's greatest heroes who have the power to make a difference in the world. Every single one of us is the leader of our own life. We all have the power to create our own path, set our own goals, and to make a difference in the world. So let us embrace our vulnerability and empathy. Let us be the leaders that we were meant to be, shining a light on those around us and making the world a better place, one person at a time. Atatürk'ün dediği gibi, zafer, zafer benim diyenin. Başarı ise başaracağım diye başlayarak sonunda başardım diye bilenindir. Her birimiz kendimize özel yürüdüğümüz yolda başarıya ve zafere olan inancımızı korkusuzca yanımıza taşımamız dileğiyle. Her şeyin bağlanılan bir inanç ve dile getirilen bir sözle başladığı gibi tüm inancımla söylüyorum ki ben kendi hayatımın lideriyim. Siz de lütfen tüm içtenliğinizle tekrar edin. Ben bir liderim. Teşekkürler.